The first time I realized we were going to be investigated, it wasn't because someone whispered FBI in a hallway. It was because the shred bin was warm. I stood in the copy room at 6:18 p.m., listening to the plastic teeth of the shredder chew through paper like it was hungry, and I watched Evan Caldwell, our CEO's nephew, feed it a stack of audit work papers with the calm focus of a man buttering toast. He didn't look up when he said it. We're simplifying compliance. Less paper. More agility. The air smelled like hot dust and toner. My palms went cold anyway. My name is Nadia Mercer. I'm 41. I was the Director of Compliance and Internal Controls at Westbridge Capital Markets in Charlotte for 12 years, long enough to know that streamlining is what people call it when they want fewer witnesses. Westbridge wasn't a bank in the way people imagine banks. We were a mid-market investment and advisory firm with a public parent company, a glossy website, and the kind of clients who use words like bespoke when they mean expensive. We touched broker-dealer activity, advisory accounts, and enough reporting obligations to keep regulators casually interested. For 12 years, I kept us boring. That was the job. Boring is safety. Boring is unremarkable exams. Boring is not having your company name show up next to words like misstatement or material weakness or why did you do that? I built the Sentinel Controls Matrix, a full RCM covering 312 key controls mapped to SEC/FINRA obligations and internal policies, with automated ownership attestations every quarter. I designed the Meridian Evidence Vault, an indexed repository that cut audit evidence retrieval time from 9.4 hours per request to 43 minutes. I rolled out the Hawthorne Trade Surveillance workflow that reduced exception backlogs by 62% and got us through our last exam with zero major findings. I also managed a compliance budget of $4,800,000 without missing a single deadline for 4 straight years. Not almost. Not we tried. Zero missed. The personal cost was predictable. I hadn't taken a full weekend off in 33 months. I missed my sister's wedding brunch because an outside auditor wanted just one more sample set by noon. I attended my son's school play with my laptop open in the car afterward, crying quietly while I finalized a remediation plan because the CFO needed it for Monday. I'm quiet. Not shy. Quiet in the way people are quiet when they can see the whole board and don't need to shout to move pieces. And that's why Evan decided I was in his way. Evan Caldwell is 34. The kind of man who wears a watch that costs more than a compliance analyst's car and still manages to look slightly unfinished, like his suit was tailored for someone who stands up straighter. He laughed too loudly at his own jokes. He called regulations guidelines. He mispronounced fiduciary as fiduciary in a leadership meeting, and nobody corrected him because his last name was more powerful than accuracy. His background, such as it was, included 1 year in special projects, 2 years in business development, and a brief stint in sales where his biggest accomplishment was booking a table at a steakhouse that didn't take reservations. Then our CEO, Grant Caldwell, his uncle, decided compliance needed fresh thinking. And Evan was given the title of Chief Compliance Officer. Not interim. Not deputy. Chief. A role that normally requires legal training, regulatory fluency, and the ability to say no to people who think the word no is negotiable. Evan had none of that. But he did have confidence, which is sometimes treated as a credential if it's attached to the right family tree. The day Evan took over, he held an all-hands compliance modernization session in the Brighton conference room, the glass-walled one overlooking Tryon Street. The room always smelled like citrus cleaning spray and expensive coffee. The chairs were too low. The table was too glossy. It was designed for optics, not work. He stood at the head of the table with a slide deck titled, Compliance, but make it fast. I sat near the middle with my notebook open, watching him like you watch someone pick up a live wire. He clicked to the first slide and said, "Okay, team, we're gonna optimize our risk bandwidth." Risk bandwidth. He smiled, pleased with himself. We've been over-documenting. We're gonna streamline the evidence pipeline. Less friction. More velocity. Evidence pipeline. One of my senior analysts, Priya Desai, leaned toward me and whispered, "Is he allergic to nouns?" I didn't smile. Not yet. Evan kept going. Also, we're gonna stop letting audit run our lives. Audits are like backward-looking. We're forward-looking. We're going to shift from prove it to trust it. Inadequate. The word floated through my head like a filing error. I raised my hand. Evan looked at me like he was surprised the furniture could speak. Yes, Nadia? What documentation will we retain to support regulatory inquiries? I asked calmly. And who signs off on exceptions? Evan's smile tightened. Great question. We're going to be agile about it. Agile isn't a retention policy, I said. A few people blinked. Priya stared down at her notes like she didn't want her face to betray her thoughts. Across the table, Marcus Heller, internal audit director, held very still, the way auditors do when they've spotted blood in the water. Evan laughed. Nadia, you're thinking old school. We're not deleting compliance. We're evolving it. He clicked to the next slide. New standard, he announced. No more mandatory evidence attachments for routine controls. If it happened, it happened. We don't need screenshots of everything. Screenshots are clutter. Clutter. He said it like a moral failing. Marcus's pen paused. Priya's eyes widened. I felt something settle in my chest, not panic. Not anger. A cold recognition. The same sensation you get when a pilot announces minor turbulence and you hear the engine change. After the meeting, Marcus caught me near the elevators. Nadia, he said quietly, tell me he didn't just propose removing evidence requirements. He did, I said. Marcus exhaled through his nose. Grant let him? Grant appointed him, I said. Marcus's mouth tightened. This is going to get ugly. Eventually, I agreed. I didn't tell Marcus what I was already thinking. Ugly was the best case scenario. Ugly means visible. Invisible is where the damage accumulates. The betrayal didn't happen all at once. It arrived in neat calendar invites. 2 weeks later, I was summoned to a strategic alignment check-in with Evan in his new office, the one that used to belong to the general counsel. The carpet was thicker. The window view was better. The air smelled like cologne and fresh paint. Evan didn't offer me a seat at first. He leaned against his desk, arms crossed, watch catching the light like it wanted attention. Nadia, he said, I'm hearing that you're not aligned. On what? I asked. He smiled like I'd asked something adorable. On modernization. On the new compliance posture. You're creating drag. Drag. As if I were an unnecessary feature. I'm creating documentation, I said. Evan waved a hand. Documentation is a tool. Not a lifestyle. I let the silence stretch. He filled it because people like Evan can't tolerate quiet. Quiet makes them feel examined. So, he continued, we're going to restructure. I'm bringing in someone who can scale with me. With you, I repeated. He nodded. I need a compliance partner, not a compliance cop. I'm not a cop, I said. I'm a seatbelt. Evan laughed. That's dramatic. No, I said. It's accurate. He finally gestured to the chair. I sat. My hands stayed still on my lap. My heartbeat stayed inside my body where it belonged. Evan slid a document across the desk. Termination. Clean. Polite. The kind of paper that tries to make betrayal look like a business decision. Here's what's going to happen, he said, voice bright. We're going to transition you out. We'll tell people you're pursuing other opportunities. Keep it positive. Protect the brand. Protect the brand. He said it like brand was a person who deserved feelings. You're firing me, I said. He tilted his head. I'm elevating the function. By removing the person who built it, I said. Evan's smile sharpened. You built a lot of processes, Nadia. But processes aren't the point. Outcomes are the point. We need to optimize the leverage. Optimize the leverage. He leaned forward, lowering his voice like he was sharing wisdom. The regulators don't want 1,000 PDFs. They want to see that we have intent. Intent. The way he said it made my skin go a little numb. Regulators want evidence, I said. Evan sighed, impatient. You're stuck in fear. I'm not running compliance on fear. I'm running it on trust. I looked at the termination document. My name typed neatly. My years reduced to a line item. 12 years of weekends and policies and control matrices flattened into an HR template. And in that moment, I didn't feel rage. I felt relief. Because if you're going to be punished for doing the job correctly, the only rational move is to stop protecting the people punishing you. I stood, smoothing my blazer like we were ending a normal meeting. Evan watched me, a little wary now. So we're good? You'll keep this discreet. I met his eyes. Calm. Understood. He smiled, satisfied. Great. I knew you'd be professional. Professional. That word always means quiet. As I walked out, I heard him call after me, and Nadia, don't take any documents. We're going paperless now. I turned slightly. You don't have to worry, I said. Because what Evan didn't understand, what he would never understand, is that I didn't need to steal anything. The evidence was already where it belonged. In systems. In logs. In retention policies. In the places arrogant people forget exist, because they're too busy performing. That night, I sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes, hands resting on the steering wheel, listening to the distant whoosh of traffic and the buzz of fluorescent lights overhead. My phone felt heavy in my palm. Not with grief. With decision. If my story resonates with you, make sure to like and subscribe. I share workplace strategy and corporate analysis every week that might just change how you navigate your career. Because the next thing I did wasn't emotional. It wasn't impulsive. It was a form submission, quiet, time-stamped, and irreversible. And it's the reason Evan Caldwell eventually learned the difference between streamlining compliance and obstructing it. What Evan didn't know was that I'd already built the exit ramps into his paperless fantasy. Not because I was paranoid. Because I'd spent 12 years watching confident men treat compliance like a mood. They don't hate rules. They hate records. Rules are negotiable in meetings. Records survive meetings. On March 3, 2022, at 7:41 a.m., I added a control to Sentinel that I labeled blandly, EVID 17, Evidence Retention and Immutability, Key Controls. It required two things. All key control evidence had to be stored in Meridian Evidence Vault, with hash-based integrity checks, and any change to evidence requirements had to be approved by legal, internal audit, and compliance, 3 separate sign-offs. It wasn't heroic. It was administrative. The best kind. On October 11, 2023, at 6:09 p.m., I also filed a routine request with IT to ensure our vault exports were worm compliant, write once, read many, because our broker-dealer function touched enough regulated activity to justify it. The ticket read, Retention Alignment for Audit Efficiency. Nobody questions audit efficiency. It's like saying you're doing it for the children. By January 5, 2025, 2 weeks before Evan's first compliance, but make it fast, deck, I created a separate incident ledger in my personal notes that mirrored our internal log. Not documents. Not files. Just dates, meeting names, and the exact words people used when they tried to erase friction. Streamline. Agile. Trust it. Words that mean, don't ask later. And 6 months before Evan fired me, on July 22, 2024, at 9:13 a.m., I updated our annual SEC exam readiness checklist to include one extra step: weekly snapshots of our control attestation status and evidence completeness rates. The snapshots were automated through Meridian. They were timestamped. They were not editable. I told myself it was for preparedness. It was also for the moment someone would inevitably try to rewrite cause and effect. That's the part people misunderstand. Preparation isn't revenge. It's refusing to be surprised by predictable behavior. So when Evan said, don't take any documents, I didn't take any documents. I didn't need to. I had an immutable record of what compliance looked like before him, and I had a clean line showing exactly when it started to degrade, who approved the degradation, and how fast it spread. He thought he was deleting friction. He was just deleting his own deniability. 2 days later, the first failure arrived, right on schedule, wearing the polite face of a client email. At 8:52 a.m., Priya Desai texted me, "Do you have a minute?" It's bad. I was at my kitchen table, coffee cooling, sunlight hitting the corner of my laptop like it was trying to be optimistic. I answered anyway. Priya didn't waste words. Evan removed evidence attachments for quarterly AML testing. Meridian's flagging missing support. Internal audit pulled a sample. It's empty. Empty, I repeated. Empty, she confirmed. Marcus is furious. The sample size is 40. We have evidence for 6. I let that sit. 6 out of 40. Not a gap. A confession. At 9:14 a.m., Westbridge received a formal client due diligence request from a pharmaceutical partner, one of the institutions that required annual compliance attestation and evidence availability. Their exact words, "Please provide supporting documentation for your control testing and remediation activities for FY24 Q4. Evan's new regime had created less paper. The client wanted paper. The estimated revenue at risk on that relationship was $7,800,000 annually. At 10:03 a.m., Evan called me. It wasn't a voicemail. He wanted the immediacy. He wanted the pressure. He wanted me to feel like I still belonged to his reality. "Nadia," he said, breath slightly fast, trying to sound casual. "Quick question. Where would someone find, the evidence artifacts for the AML controls?" "Meridian," I said. He laughed too light. Right. But I mean, outside Meridian. Like, in an offline cache. Because Meridian is, heavy. As if compliance was a gym workout. "There isn't one," I said. A pause. I heard shuffling, maybe him pacing in his expensive shoes. "Okay," he said, voice tightening. "Can you just help us reconstruct? We'll retroactively optimize the documentation." It's not a big deal. Retroactively optimize. A phrase that should come with handcuffs. "No," I said. Evan's tone sharpened. "Nadia, don't be like this. We're trying to protect the firm. This is bigger than you." "It's bigger than you," I corrected. He inhaled, forced calm. "Fine. Then tell me the fastest way to export from Meridian." "You need access," I said. "I'm the CCO," he snapped. "Of course I have access." "Not to worm exports," I said. "Those require dual approval. Legal and audit." Silence. That was the sound of him learning that titles don't override architecture. He tried again, softer. "Can you call someone? Just make it happen." "No," I said. He exhaled through his teeth. "You're really going to let this burn?" "I'm going to let it be accurate," I replied. He hung up. And I noted the call time. Habit. Survival. Respect for chronology. By the end of the week, the system failure became a relationship failure because regulators aren't the only ones who like evidence. Clients like it too, especially when their money is involved. On Friday at 3:37 p.m., Marcus Heller emailed a memo to the audit committee. "Evidence retention controls have been altered without tri-party approval. Auditability is compromised." He didn't embellish. Marcus never embellished. He just documented in a way that made denial impossible. At 4:11 p.m., Grant Caldwell, the CEO, scheduled an urgent governance sync for Monday morning. The subject line was Compliance Modernization, Clarifications. Clarifications is what people call it when they're about to discover consequences. At 5:22 p.m., Priya called me again from a stairwell, the acoustics hollow, her voice thin. "He's making us backfill," she said. "He wants screenshots recreated. He wants us to reconstruct intent." Reconstruct intent. Evan's favorite magic trick. "Don't," I said. Priya's breath caught. He said it's temporary. "It won't be," I replied. "It becomes policy the moment you comply." She was quiet for a beat. "Then, what do I do?" "Tell Marcus," I said. "In writing." She swallowed. "Okay." At 6:03 p.m., Evan texted me. Not a call this time. He wanted something he could edit emotionally later. "Need you to be a team player. Just confirm the new policy was aligned previously. It'll stabilize the narrative." Stabilize the narrative. I stared at the words. He still thought reality was a story you could massage. I replied with 2 words, "Not true." He immediately sent another message. "You're exposing us to risk." I replied, "You did." No punctuation. No flourish. Just cause and effect. 2 weeks in, the legal layer arrived. It always does. The moment an institution realizes you can't produce evidence, the question becomes, are you incompetent or are you lying? On Tuesday at 8:08 a.m., our external audit firm, Bishop and Rowe, issued a formal notice that they were expanding testing due to control environment deterioration. The incremental fee estimate attached to the notice was $420,000. Not a hypothetical, an invoice. At 9:19 a.m., a major institutional client terminated their advisory relationship effective immediately, citing inability to validate compliance assertions. The lost annual revenue, $12,600,000. Grant Caldwell finally stopped calling it modernization. He called it a situation. And Evan, who had been so eager to remove documentation, suddenly became very interested in creating it. He called me at 10:42 p.m. that night. I could hear wind in the background, like he was outside. He sounded like a man trying to outrun his own timeline. "Nadia," he said, voice rough, "listen. I need you to help me fix this. I'll pay you. Consulting. Whatever you want. Name a number." "No," I said. Okay, he rushed. "Then a role. We'll bring you back. Better title. Deputy CCO. We'll say this was a transition issue." "A transition issue," I repeated. "Yes," he said quickly. "We'll align on messaging. We'll get ahead of it." "You can't get ahead of a record," I said. His breathing sped up. "You're enjoying this." I paused. Not because I was offended. Because the assumption was revealing. "I'm not enjoying it," I said. "I'm relieved I'm not responsible for it anymore." His voice cracked. "They're talking about the SEC." "I know," I said. "How do you—" He stopped himself, then tried a different angle. "If you don't help, I'll tell them you sabotaged this. You built Meridian. You could've." "Evan," I said, calm, "Meridian is worm compliant. By design. It records everything, including attempts." Silence again. He swallowed audibly. Okay. Just tell me what you want." I considered it. Not emotionally. Strategically. "I want 3 things," I said. A written correction that I was terminated for opposing improper compliance changes. A written statement to the audit committee that evidence requirements were removed without proper approval. And no one touches my name again. He whispered, "That's it." "That's enough," I said. He sounded small when he replied. "Grant won't agree." "Then you won't either," I said. He tried to laugh, but it came out as air. "Nadia, please." "No," I said. Before I tell you what happened next, you might be wondering, why didn't I stop him earlier? Why not go to Grant the moment Evan started talking about trust over evidence? That's exactly what I'll cover in next week's video, so make sure you're subscribed. 3 weeks in, the building stopped smelling like cologne and citrus cleaner and started smelling like cold coffee and printer heat. That's how you can tell panic has moved in. People stop eating lunch. Meetings multiply. Printers run like they're trying to confess. Westbridge didn't implode with one dramatic explosion. It cracked in 3 places at once: system, client, and regulator. Evan managed to be the common denominator without ever noticing the pattern. The system failure was internal, the kind that looks small until you understand what it represents. Meridian Evidence Vault ran integrity checks every night at 2 a.m. It wasn't a moral compass. It was a scheduled job. On Tuesday at 2:03 a.m., Meridian threw a red flag: 1,284 missing evidence artifacts across key controls that had previously met completeness thresholds. The automated report went to compliance ops, internal audit, legal, and, because I designed it to be annoying, Grant Caldwell's executive assistant. At 7:12 a.m., Priya texted me. The completeness score dropped from 94% to 41% overnight. "It's like someone kicked the legs out." "Someone did," I replied. By 9:08 a.m., Marcus Heller called me. You could hear papers shuffling behind him, that frantic sound of a man trying to build a timeline out of rubble. "Nadia," he said, voice tight, "I have to ask. Did you lock something? Did you trigger this?" "No," I said. He exhaled. "Okay. Because it looks like evidence requirements were removed and the system is correctly reporting that we can't substantiate controls. Which means our last attestation is now questionable." "Not questionable," I said. "Unsupported." Marcus went quiet for a beat. "Grant is asking for a simple fix." "There isn't one," I said. "I know," Marcus muttered. "I just needed to hear you say it." The client failure hit the next day. A second institutional partner, An advisory client with a conservative risk committee requested a mid-cycle compliance package due to recent reporting inconsistencies. That's what they wrote. Inconsistent reporting is what people say when they suspect you're lying, but want to stay polite while they assemble their exit. Their account was worth $9,400,000 annually. At 11:36 a.m., their counsel copied our legal department and asked for preservation of records related to evidence retention changes from January 1, 2024 to present. Preservation. The word that makes shredders irrelevant. And then the regulator layer arrived, not with sirens, but with a letter that looked like every other letter until you read it twice. On Thursday at 4:52 p.m., Westbridge received an SEC document preservation notice and request for information tied to potential deficiencies in compliance controls and disclosures. It wasn't an accusation yet. It was a hand on the doorknob. The firm's initial response budget, outside counsel, forensics, audit expansion, was authorized Friday morning at $3,250,000. Grant called it temporary spend. Legal called it the opening invoice. By Friday afternoon, the cumulative damage was no longer something you could hide under optimistic PowerPoints. $12,600,000 annual revenue already lost, terminated advisory relationship. $2,300,000 annual revenue at risk from our pharmaceutical partner. They hadn't terminated yet, but they'd paused new allocations. $9,400,000 annual revenue at risk from the second institutional client. $420,000 additional external audit fees from Bishop and Rowe. $3,250,000 initial legal/forensic response budget. Total quantified exposure on paper. $28? No, not exposure. Damage and likely damage combined. $29,670,000. Grant finally stopped asking for clarifications. He started asking for scapegoats. Evan responded the way people respond when they're cornered. He tried to make the person with the timeline disappear. At 9:17 p.m. Friday, I received a letter from a boutique law firm with a name that sounded expensive and vaguely British, Caldwell and Finch. Subject: cease and desist, defamation and interference. They claimed I had engaged in a pattern of malicious reporting designed to harm Mr. Evan Caldwell and Westbridge Capital Markets, and demanded I retract statements to internal stakeholders and third parties. Third parties, meaning regulators and clients. It ended with a line that was supposed to sound frightening. Failure to comply will result in immediate legal action seeking damages in excess of $10 million. $10 million. It was a bold number for someone whose best defense was "we went paperless." I forwarded it to my own attorney, an employment and securities whistleblower specialist named Carmen Liu, at 9:23 p.m. with 3 words: he escalated. Carmen replied at 9:31 p.m. Good. Don't respond. Evan also left me a voicemail at 11:04 p.m. His voice was hoarse, like he'd been talking all day and still didn't know what to say. "Nadia, this is out of control," he said. You're causing cascading harm. Just call me. We can align on a solution. I'll make you whole. Please. Make you whole. The phrase people use when they finally realized you were never the problem. I didn't call him. I slept. Because what Evan still didn't know was that my quiet form submission wasn't just a complaint. It was a whistleblower report filed with detailed exhibits that had already triggered a formal preservation obligation inside the firm. On January 28, 2025, at 10:17 p.m., the night I sat in my car after being fired, I submitted a tip to the SEC via their online portal, including Sentinel Control mapping showing exactly which evidence requirements were removed. Meridian completeness snapshots from July 22, 2024 through February 1, 2025. Meeting notes with dates and attendees, including Evan's Trust It policy. Proof of the worm export configuration, ticket ID, and system settings. Copies of internal communications instructing backfill and reconstruct intent. I didn't include feelings. I included artifacts. Evan thought he could intimidate me into silence. He didn't realize silence was no longer required. By week 5, Westbridge became the kind of place where elevators felt like confession booths. The emergency meetings stopped being urgent. They became daily, then twice daily, then stay available. Grant Caldwell's calendar looked like a car crash made of rectangles. On Monday morning, Grant convened an emergency session with the audit committee and outside counsel in the Brighton conference room, the same glass-walled room where Evan had debuted compliance, but make it fast. It felt fitting in a way no one commented on. The room was too bright. The city outside looked indifferent. The citrus cleaner smell couldn't compete with fear. Marcus was there, stiff and pale. Priya sat near the wall with a laptop open, hands trembling slightly over the trackpad. Rebecca Sterling, general counsel, sat with a binder so thick it could have been used as a doorstop. Evan arrived last. He wore a suit that was very expensive and somehow still looked like it was trying to escape him. His hair was too perfect for the hour. His smile didn't appear this time. He'd stopped performing and started negotiating. Grant opened with a sentence that wasn't a question. "Evan," he said, voice low, "did you authorize removal of evidence requirements without tri-party approval?" Evan blinked, then tried to laugh. "Grant, you're framing this like a violation. It was a modernization initiative." "Evidence is." Rebecca Sterling cut him off. "Evidence is legally required," she said flatly. Evan looked at her like she'd betrayed him by knowing the law. Marcus slid a page across the table. "Sentinel shows EVID 17 was bypassed," he said. "The audit trail indicates your login approved the change on February 6, 2025 at 2:14 p.m. Evan's throat bobbed. That's a technical detail." "I mean, I didn't." Priya spoke, small but clear. "You told me to remove attachments. You said screenshots were clutter." Evan turned toward her, eyes sharp. "Priya, don't." She flinched, then steadied. "You did." That's when Evan tried his final move, the family channel. He looked at Grant and softened his voice. "Uncle Grant, this is being blown out of proportion. Nadia had a vendetta. She engineered this. She built Meridian. She knew exactly how to make it look bad." Grant stared at him for a long moment, and I could see something shift, not anger exactly. Disappointment. The recognition that nepotism doesn't just hire incompetence. It inherits it. Rebecca Sterling spoke again. "Nadia Mercer no longer has access. Meridian's worm exports show the completeness decline is directly tied to policy changes made under Evan's credentials. That's not engineering. That's math." Evan's jaw tightened. "Okay," he snapped, losing the last of his polish. "Fine. Then bring her back. She fixes it. She always fixes it. That's what she's for. That's what she's for." A sentence that explained his entire worldview more cleanly than any investigation memo. Grant's voice went cold. "You don't get to assign her function after you fired her." Evan's eyes widened slightly, panic peeking through. "I can call her." "I can." "I already did," Grant said. He looked at me. "Yes, me. Because by then, I wasn't a rumor. I was a necessary person." Grant had asked, through Rebecca and Marcus, if I would join the meeting remotely. Carmen Liu, my attorney, was on the line too. We weren't improvising. We were documenting. Grant said, "Nadia, we're in crisis. What would it take for you to assist in remediation?" Evan stared at the speakerphone like he couldn't believe my voice was still allowed in rooms he used to control. I kept my tone calm. "I'm willing to assist," I said. "Under conditions." Evan exhaled sharply, like relief. "See? Great. Will." I continued. "My conditions are not negotiated with Evan." Silence. Grant said, "Understood." "First," I said, "I want written acknowledgement that I was terminated for opposing improper compliance changes. Second, I want a written correction sent to any clients who received documentation attributing decision ownership to me. Third, I want a severance settlement for retaliatory termination." Evan barked a laugh. "Retaliatory? You." Carmen's voice cut in, smooth as glass. "Evan, stop speaking." He did not stop. He couldn't. Grant asked carefully, "What amount?" Carmen answered for me. "We can discuss figures, but Nadia's minimum framework includes compensation consistent with her tenure and the damage done to her reputation." Evan's voice rose. "This is extortion." Carmen didn't blink through the phone. No, this is negotiation. Extortion involves threats. We're responding to yours. Evan's breathing got audible again. I'll sue her. I'll sue all of you. I'll. Rebecca Sterling turned to Grant. We need to remove him from decision-making now. Grant closed his eyes for a second, like he was finally feeling the weight of what he'd created. Then he said it. Evan, you're suspended effective immediately. Evan jolted. You can't. Grant's voice stayed level. I can. And I am. That decision felt inevitable because it was. Once clients and regulators are involved, nepotism stops being charming and starts being expensive. 2 days later, within 48 hours of that meeting, the collapse went from internal crisis to federal reality. The following Wednesday at 8:30 a.m., Westbridge received subpoenas. Not requests. Subpoenas. One for control environment documentation. One for client communications. One for internal approvals. One for evidence retention changes. One for audit interactions. The building's mood changed again. Not panic now. Fear with posture. At 9:14 a.m., 2 agents arrived. Not in suits like TV. In plain clothes with calm faces and credentials that didn't need raising voices. They asked for conference room B12. The one people used for strategy. They brought a laptop case and a box of evidence bags. Evan, who had once called screenshots clutter, suddenly had strong opinions about data. He tried to make a final action out of it. At 10:07 a.m., IT flagged an attempted access to Meridian's admin console from Evan's user profile. He was suspended. The attempt was blocked. The audit log captured it anyway. He tried again at 10:08 a.m. from a different device. Blocked. Logged. At 10:19 a.m., he called me. Not blocked number this time. His actual number. He'd run out of theatrics. Nadia, he said, voice shaking. They're here. They're actually here. Yes, I said. You have to fix this, he blurted. You have to tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them I didn't know. Tell them it was process drift. Process drift. He finally found a term that almost fit. I didn't answer immediately. Not for drama. Because I was listening to his breathing, to the desperation, to the way his confidence had vanished the moment consequences stopped being social and became legal. Nadia, he said again, high and raw, I'm not going to prison. Do you hear me? I'm not. I'll pay you. I'll give you anything. Just make it stop. There it was. The specific quote. The core fear, finally spoken without jargon. I can't make it stop, I said. And neither can you. He swallowed hard. Then you did this. I kept my tone steady. No, you did it. I just refused to carry it. He started to cry, not sobbing, just that thin, broken sound of someone trying to keep control of their voice and failing. You're ruining my life, he whispered. I replied, softly, you removed evidence requirements in a regulated business. That's what ruined your life. He hung up. That afternoon, Grant Caldwell resigned. Not because he wanted to. Because the board demanded it. The public parent company stock dropped 34% over 6 trading days after the disclosure of material compliance failures and regulatory investigation. Press releases are always polite. Markets aren't. Westbridge paid $50 million in fines and penalties across SEC and related regulatory settlements. $50 million is the kind of number that makes even arrogant people sit down. Evan was charged with fraud and obstruction related to evidence destruction and false statements. He wasn't the only one investigated, but he was the only one who had thought shredders were a strategy. Supporting characters landed where they should have, too. Marcus Heller was appointed interim chief risk officer because someone had to clean the house and he was already holding the flashlight. Priya Desai received a formal commendation from the board for cooperating and documenting instructions to backfill. She got promoted to compliance operations manager with a $22,000 raise. She also started sleeping again, which mattered more. Rebecca Sterling stayed general counsel, but gained a permanent tick in her left eye whenever someone said modernization. And me? I didn't return as Evan's safety net. I returned as a condition of survival for the firm, on paper, with authority, and without apologies. 6 months later, I walked back into Westbridge's lobby, and it smelled the same: polished stone, expensive air freshener, money trying to masquerade as cleanliness. But the building felt different. Quieter in a healthier way. Less performance. More work. I was rehired as Chief Compliance Officer. Not interim. Chief. My base salary was $410,000 with a performance bonus target of 60%. I also received a retention equity grant in the parent company valued at $1,200,000 at the grant date. That wasn't generosity. It was the market price of, please don't let us collapse again. The $5 million whistleblower reward came later, after the settlement. It arrived without confetti, just a wire transfer and a letter with careful wording. Money never feels moral. It feels heavy. Like consequence. I used it the way I use everything, practically. I paid off my mortgage. I funded my son's college account. I donated $250,000 to a legal aid organization that helps employees navigate retaliation because people shouldn't have to choose between truth and rent. And I built what Evan could never have built because he didn't understand why it existed. I expanded Sentinel from 312 controls to 487 and added mandatory evidence thresholds tied to automated alerts to the audit committee, not just management. If completeness dropped below 90% for key controls, the board got notified. Not because the board likes emails. Because the board likes not being fined $50 million. I restructured Meridian Evidence Vault access so no single executive, even the CEO, could alter evidence requirements unilaterally. Dual control. Legal plus audit. Always. I created a client attribution protocol requiring that any client-facing RCA include named decision owners with documented approvals. If someone wanted to assign fault, they could do it with their signature. And I instituted a policy that sounds petty until you've lived it. No one uses the phrase "trust it" in a compliance meeting without also showing the evidence. Evan's current situation was, as promised, not my hobby. He pleaded not guilty at first, then accepted a plea agreement later. The court documents were factual, not theatrical. He received a federal sentence. Grant Caldwell paid back compensation and surrendered board positions. Westbridge survived, barely, because money can absorb a lot of shame if you pay enough of it. But the culture changed in the way cultures only change after consequences. People stopped treating compliance as an obstacle and started treating it as a seatbelt. And I got my weekends back. Not all of them. I'm still in compliance. Let's not pretend I became a poet. But I went to my son's next school play and sat through the whole thing without checking my phone. I listened to bad singing and felt a kind of quiet satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge. It was respect. For my life. For my work. For the truth. If you've ever felt that particular kind of professional nausea, watching someone unqualified get handed authority over the thing you built, then being punished for refusing to pretend the rules don't exist, I hope this shows that standing your ground works. I share workplace strategies and corporate analysis every week that help you navigate professional betrayal. Like and subscribe if you found value here. Remember, when someone tells you compliance is just paperwork, what they're really saying is they're counting on you to be the only person who remembers what happened, so make sure the record remembers too.